For about 90% of my climbing career, I was really focused on bouldering. I thought bouldering was the most pure form of climbing and really the end game to all. I mean, it was just all about the movement and all about the physicality of it. What I didn't realize is that bouldering doesn't really give you a whole lot of the mental side of climbing. And so when I met my climbing partner, she suggested that we went and did a big wall. So I dabbled with ropes before. I mean, I kind of did a little bit of sport climbing here and there, and I placed a cam on like a 5/8. But in terms of actually being able to really execute a big wall, I had no experience. I had no clue. I thought we were just going to be doing something multi-pitch or maybe even easier than that. But I was very wrong. My first objective was to go do an alpine route called the Diamond in Colorado. I mean, it was completely different to anything I'd ever done. It was waking up at 2 in the morning just because you would have to walk in this ridiculously long distance to even get to the base of the wall. And when I first arrived, after waking up at 2 and walking for 3 hours at the Diamond's base, I was completely blown away. I mean, the Diamond isn't this giant piece of rock. It is definitely a big wall, but the first 900 feet of it before you get to the boardwalk is fairly simple. And so my partner was kind of like, okay, to save time, we're going to go ahead and free solo the first 900 feet to the boardwalk, and then we're going to walk across this thing to, let's see, I think this route called Hearts and Arrows. And I was like, I had no idea. I was very proficient at bouldering, and I thought I was a good climber in general, so I was like, yeah, I got this covered. I had this huge ego about me, which was kind of funny, thinking about it now. And so we started off, I think it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and we free soloed for the first 900 feet. And every single time I started to move up on the wall, I would just become more and more afraid. Like, I would move less fluidly. I would be like, oh, well, I mean, I went the 30 feet. Technically, I should be done. Like, my brain was not keeping up with what my situation was. But, I pushed through, and then I wound up getting to the boardwalk, and I went over to the base of the route with Mayan, and I watched her rope up, and I was like, oh, rope, that's interesting. And she started climbing for about 100 feet above me. And, I was kind of trying to keep it together. I was focusing as much as I could on where I was and not the height, because it turns out I was deathly afraid of being that far up off the ground. It was just the exposure was big for me, and I'd never dealt with anything to that point. And so I was just kind of focusing in on each little movement, and again, every single time I started going up, I started panicking. I'd never really climbed on granite before. I'd never really dealt with gear before, and most importantly, I'd never really even been in those kinds of conditions. And so I failed. I utterly failed. She offered me a lead, and I couldn't even muster the courage to even experiment with it or even try. And so Mayan just dragged me up this wall. I had no choice to go. I had committed to finishing this thing, but every single second I was just praying that it would just be over. I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't mentally handle anything that was going on. I was sitting on, it was a solid anchor, and but it was still not bolted. So I was on two cam placements, and I was just nervous and unhappy and just expecting everything to rip apart and me to go plummeting, thousands of feet to my death. Well, by thousands of feet, like hundreds of feet to my death. It never really happened, but my imagination just destroyed any ability I had to rock climb. And so there was one specific moment in that entire route where I was watching Mayan. I was sitting on not exactly the best anchor ever created, but it's what we had, and it was all we had. And Mayan had clipped into a pin, and she had run out to the next like placement. But before she was able to get the placement in, I watched as she ripped off a hold and started teetering out. And the only thing I could think of was, well, she's clipped into a rusty piton, which is going to blow. And I'm barely into a good anchor over here. If she falls, we are going to die. Like, there's just, and that might be an exaggeration. I don't think it was, though. And in that moment, everything froze. Like, everything stopped. And what was going through my head was this need to process, to understand, to know more about what situation I'd put myself in, because I was so inexperienced and I was so out of my element that not having anything to like fall back onto knowledge-wise, like I just went paralyzed. Like I couldn't give out rope for slack. I couldn't do anything. And then I had to like figure out how to bring myself back into that, because I remember kind of hearing a muffled yell for rope or slack or something that brought me back into the moment. And luckily enough, Maya was able to like pull back on, and she didn't fall, and managed to get the next piece of protection in. And we continued on to the top, and I mean, I got worked all the way through there. But in that one moment where time stopped, that was the game changer. That was the switch that flipped. And I knew that this was something that I had to pursue. This was something I had to learn about. This was going to become one of the most important events of my life, because this was going to be the direction I wanted to go in. There was this mental need to figure out what I'd put myself into and how to overcome it. And so after that, it was big wall. It was ropes, it was trad, it was placing gear, it was learning hand jams, it was learning safe systems, smart systems, efficient systems. And even to this day, I'm still learning and I'm still figuring it out. I'm still trying to like make it more concise or more efficient or more practical. And I will always look on that moment, that one piece, that one thing where I watched the cam wiggling its way out of the crack that I was sitting on, as that game changer for me. That one part of life that I needed to learn about.